This is the all-new Subaru Outback. And though hindi halata sa itsura niya, this car is actually all new from the ground up. And it also debuts the 4th generation of Subaru's EyeSight driver assistance technologies, which is also the closest anyone could ever experience to Tesla's autopilot here in the Philippines. In terms of design, hindi masyadong nagbago itong all-new Subaru Outback, at least sa kanyang panlabas. As a reminder, the Outback is essentially a lifted wagon version of the Subaru Legacy, which is a mid-size executive sedan that's now exclusively sold in the North American market, which is why it bears a lot of resemblance sa kotseng iyon. Which means you have those adaptive LED headlights with C-shaped LED daytime running lights, a hexagonal frameless grille, and of course, the obligatory body cladding that suddenly makes this car an SUV, even though this is ever so slightly lower than a Subaru Forester. But with 213mm of ground clearance, this car can legitimately go over rough terrain, though syempre not in the same level as your body-on-frame SUVs like the Toyota Fortuner. Overall, the all-new Outback doesn't look too different from the previous generation model, though that's not necessarily a bad thing. Ngayon naman, dumako naman tayo sa interior ng bagong Subaru Outback, which looks completely different from the previous generation model.
So now that we're here inside the all-new Subaru Outback, and I'd like to commend the interior, which is done in soft touch plastics. Itong doors are soft touch plastic, then may leather ka rin dito. Almost everything that you're gonna be touching here is in soft touch plastic, and that includes even the rear doors, which is a nice touch. Usually, manufacturers would cheap out on the rear seats, no? Anyhow, one of the other things that you will easily notice sa interior nito is yung kanyang large 11.3 or 11.6 inch touchscreen that runs the latest generation of the Subaru Starlink user interface. Pero before we head on to that, the interior space dito is really nice. There's a lot of adjustment for the power adjustable seats, the steering wheel, so it's easy to find your ideal driving position. And I love the driving position of the Subaru Outback actually. You don't sit that high na parang PPV, nor too low na parang nakasedan ka. It's basically the Goldilocks zone pagdating sa driving positions, no? And it provides one of the best seating positions for basically almost any type of person. And speaking of seat adjustments, itong kanyang infotainment system is linked to what you would call the driver focus facial recognition feature. So it's this pod sa ibabaw ng infotainment system, bale, that emits infrared and whatever facial recognition hardware there is a thing na ito sa pod na to. And it memorizes basically your settings. So, tuwing i-start mo tong kotse na to, it will try to scan the face ng driver, and if it recognizes na ako to, since I registered my face sa kotse nito, the seats will adjust back to the position I last left it nung ito naka-save sa gwapo kong mukha. Sorry, not sorry. Anyhow, so apart from being a convenience feature of basically remembering your last seat settings or your mirror settings or yung kanyang aircon controls, whatever other vehicle settings, no, it is also tied to one of the car's newer safety features, no. It basically also tracks your face if you're looking away from the road or you're looking at your phone, and then it will emit a warning, an audible and a visual warning na you have to look on the road, you have to bring your eyes back to the road. So have we reached a point in life sa ating henerasyon na sa sobrang distracted natin mag-drive, even a car needs to tell us that we should look forward habang to drive, no? Anyhow, that brings me to the car's infotainment system.
So two things muna that I don't like about this infotainment system. One is aircon controls. I don't like the fact na dito yung aircon controls, they're in a touchscreen. I prefer it ang may hard button siya. Though at least may hard buttons ka for the temperature, but that's about it. I also don't like the fact na yung engine start-stop mo needs to be accessed through a quick access menu, which is here. And every time you start the car, you have to go through that menu kung patayin yung engine start-stop, which is pretty annoying. Apart from that, the infotainment system is really nice. It's really nice to use. Okay yung response niya, though not as slick as I guess Ford Sync 3 in terms of response. Okay naman siya.
but there are infotainment systems that feel snappier. It's well laid out at least because the icons are big, so it's easy to tap kapag let's say you're on the move. And then you also have built-in navigation by TomTom. And then you have Apple CarPlay. This is how Apple CarPlay looks like. It looks really nice in this big screen. Mukha siyang iPad nga eh. Mukha siyang iPad na nakalagay sa dashboard mo. This is how Waze looks like. Now let's try Android Auto. Ito ang disappointing nga lang. This is how Android Auto looks like in the Starlink infotainment system. Ang liit niya lang. It's a tiny screen. It's not exactly good. So unlike yung Apple CarPlay mo, which occupies almost the entire screen, this occupies like such a tiny amount of the screen of the real estate. And then you also have front-facing camera and also a curved camera. That's about it.
And then sounds are played through an awesome Harman Kardon sound system. And then as for rear seat space, it's actually very generous, with plenty of head, leg, and shoulder room for all three people. And that's despite having this center tunnel. And as typical of Subaru, there's plenty of glass area, which gives the interior a lot of light. And then moving towards the trunk, which by the way can be opened by putting your hands on the car's emblem, assuming you have the car's smart key fob, you are provided with 522 liters of cargo area. And this expands to nearly 1300 liters with all the seats down. And then of course, we have to talk about the Subaru EyeSight 4.0 system, which unlike past EyeSight versions, you can see that the stereoscopic cameras are now mounted flushed onto the windshield, unlike yung dating version na nakalawit lang siya, which as a result, the system now has a much wider field of view. And this enables two things. It currently has the best lane centering feature in the industry, since it's now easier for the system to lock itself at the car up front, as well as the surrounding lane markings. Plus, it enables a feature called Pre-Collision Steering Assist, which combined with the car's blind spot warning, it now has the ability to avoid a collision altogether, because the car can now steer you away from an imminent crash. The Subaru Outback is indeed the closest anyone could get from experiencing Tesla's autopilot system. Now, as for the car's engine, this uses a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder horizontally opposed boxer engine, and that's your only choice this time around. Gone is the previous model's 3.6-liter 6-cylinder boxer engine, and it's primarily why this car has a much lower SRP than before. And of course, in typical Subaru fashion, power is sent to all four wheels via a CVT.
So how does a Subaru Outback feel like on the road? So as I've mentioned kanina, the biggest change the Subaru Outback is apart from of course the all-new Subaru Global Platform, yung biggest change niya which will be easily noticeable to everyone, especially if you've come from the 3.6-liter Subaru Outback, is basically the lack of the 3.6-liter boxer engine, no? So, the only variant now that's being sold in the Philippine market is the 2.5-liter 2.5i Touring 2.5i-T variant basically. And the question is, will you miss the 3.6-liter boxer engine if that's what you're looking for? Honestly, yes. That engine had a lot of power. That engine was also super smooth. Boxer engines are known to be smooth naman talaga because of the pistons firing at ng horizontal, no? So the vibrations are basically cancelled out. But apart from that, it had a lot of smooth power, and when you push that engine hard, ang gandang tunog eh. It sounds like a Porsche 911 basically, because that's the same layout as what you would find in a Porsche 911, which is a 6-cylinder boxer engine. So sayang, no? But the reason for it is the 2.4 turbo has replaced that engine globally, but that engine pala, not even globally pala, that engine is what replaces the 3.6-liter boxer engine, but only in North America. That engine is only available for the North American Outback. The rest of the world would only get the 2.5-liter boxer engine. But if you've been content with the 2.5-liter boxer engine naman before, then you wouldn't have a problem with this engine. Sure, it's not gonna be as powerful as the 3.6-liter boxer engine, but it's fine. I wouldn't say it's underpowered. I would consider it more on the sakto lang side, no? Hindi ko siya naiisip na parang I wanted more power. It's sakto lang. There's decent pull throughout the rev range. Nothing spectacular, but again, yun nga, sakto lang. Not something that would excite you in any form or way. But my main concern would be the CVT, no? So for the most part, okay lang naman yung CVT. It's when you wanna overtake, no? So it tries to mimic an automatic. May fake gear changes siya. But the end result sa totoo lang talaga is the transmission can feel sluggish at times, no? So for tootling around the city, okay lang naman siya. Yung mga ganitong low speed, sakto lang siya. The response is really good. It's super responsive. Pero when you bury your foot down, that's when you start to feel na yung CVT niya is a bit on the sluggish side. Para it doesn't give you the ratio that you want if you want to overtake a car, let's say in a provincial road. I wouldn't say that the engine is underpowered sa totoo lang. It's really more of the CVT talaga, to be honest. And then speaking of that engine and CVT combination, fuel economy isn't exactly what you would call excellent with this engine, no? I've been doing 10.2 liters per 100 kilometers. So converted to km per liter, that should end up at around 9.8 kilometers per liter, which is I've been driving mid-size sedans like sa mga Mazda 6 wagon ko is a 2.5 liter, no? My Mazda 6 wagon is a 2.5 liter din. But my fuel economy in these same circumstances na nasa probinsya ako sa Santa Rosa, Laguna are double-digit figures, no? I'm averaging in that car at 11.2 kilometers per liter. And under the same circumstances that the Subaru Outback is achieving mga nasa 9.8 km per liter, which is not exactly fuel efficient, not exactly matakot din either. It's nothing spectacular. Sakto lang. And then as for the rest of the driving experience, this car is really refined. Ang sobrang refined ng coaching na to. This car is really good at eating up the miles, especially if you're on long drives sa NLEX or sa SLEX. This is a relaxing car to drive. I love the seats, I love the overall refinement, tahimik niya. There's a bit of wind whistle pagdating dito sa mirrors, but it's not too bad. Sakto lang, but road noise is really minimal. It's really good. And the suspension, I always commend Subarus for having good long travel suspension, no? And the Outback is no exception, no? That also applies to the Outback, and the suspension deals with bumps beautifully. It's almost as delicate as what you would expect pa nga in a Lexus RX. It's really good. The ride quality is really good, and it's basically a really excellent long distance cruiser, to be honest. Is it a sporty car? Not exactly. Steering is responsive. Okay, so ito, I'm wiggling the steering wheel ngayon. It's changing directions in not as eager as my Mazda 6, no? So to lang, this really doesn't have a direct competitor tong Subaru Outback, but since this is still technically a ruggedized wagon, I think it would be best to compare to my Mazda 6 wagon. And then, yeah, it's not exactly what you would call sporty, but sakto lang. There's reasonable amounts of grip when you enter and exit through corners, especially since this is all-wheel drive. The steering wheel has a reasonable amount of response, though not as responsive as what you would find nga in a Mazda. There's also a decent amount of feedback, konti lang, but sakto lang, it's okay. Nothing that will, again, make you feel na this car is responsive and sporty if you take it out in a slalom course. But for what it's worth, for what its main intent is, which is basically long distance touring comfort and luxury, this car performs excellently. No PPV talaga can match the smoothness and the refinement of a car ng ganito ang katawan na talagang rigid global platforms ang ginagamit sa kotse. It's really a world-class kind of comfort and luxury. Then as for the brakes are, again, here in Golf Latout page, we talk about every single detail of the car. So the brakes feel reassuringly good. Okay naman yung brakes niya. And because this has a high amount of ground clearance, more than 200 millimeters as a matter of fact, let me check back on the spec sheet. This can actually do a decent amount of off-roading, no? Probably not what you would try to do in a body-on-frame SUV like a Fortuner, but for most people's intents and for how most people deal with their SUVs, the Subaru Outback is more than capable. Because let's be honest, kahit naman yung mga naka-Fortuner, they don't even take that car off-road. Or at least most of them don't take it off-road. Talagang pang grocery lang nila, pang mall. So, for what the Outback is capable of, it's more than enough for the people living in Forbes Park or Ayala West Grove, basically itong mga posh villages na to. It's more than enough for those people. So as for the new EyeSight 4.0, kung mapapansin niyo yung kanyang set of stereo cameras niya ngayon, hindi siya yung para nakalawit lang sa baba ng windshield. This time around, makikita yung stereo cameras niya, naka-flash na siya dito sa windshield, nakadikit na siya. Just like in the Isuzu D-Max, which is not a surprising thing kasi yung supplier nila, which is Hitachi, parehas lang naman. Pero mas advanced itong bagong EyeSight 4 even compared to the one that's in the Isuzu. Kasi, yun nga, apart from the adaptive cruise control, which now drives like a human being, kasi when you start to use a turn signal and then change yung direction mo sa steering para makapag-overtake ka, nag-accelerate na dyan. So basically, it just acts like a human being when it overtakes vehicles sa expressway, no? But apart from that, it now has the best lane centering feature sa industriyang ito, which works almost perfectly. Kahit sa mga sharp curves, though syempre may limitation pa rin kung ganong ka-sharp na curve yung kaya ng EyeSight 4. But what I just wanna say is, posibleng-posible sa'yo pumunta ng Manila hanggang Batangas or Manila hanggang Clark nang hindi halos sumahawak sa steering wheel. As in, hawak-hawak ko lang, tap-tap mo lang na para mawala yung keep your hands on the wheel warning. It's possible. I wouldn't recommend you doing it because syempre you still have to be alert kapag sa mga bagay na ito, sa mga semi-autonomous driving features na ito. Just remember na if you're gonna do that lang, you have to be responsible pa rin sa pagdadrive mo. Ultimately, you are still responsible sa pagdadrive mo. And going back to adaptive cruise control, again, it drives so much like a human being now. It's smooth. It now is able to recognize if overtake ka na ng mga slower vehicles sa expressway. Working in conjunction nga dito sa kanyang lane centering na bagong feature nga niya, it basically is able to also steer itself kahit sa traffic. Ito, paakit ako ng silang ngayon, paakit ng Tagaytay, and I'm not touching the gas and the brake pedal. Na ano ko lang yung steering wheel para mawala nga yung warning nga na yun na you have to keep your hands on the wheel. But see, I'm not even doing anything. Basically at this point, alam niyo yung punto ko na gusto iparating. Ang sobrang ganda ng EyeSight 4.0.
Buying a Subaru Outback is actually quite simple because there's only one variant to choose from, which is priced at a little under 2.4 million pesos. On top of the aforementioned EyeSight 4.0 features, you also get front and rear automatic emergency braking, blind spot warning, and rear cross traffic alert. And for the full specs, you can visit goflatoutph.com. Now, the Subaru Outback is now exclusively powered by a 2.5-liter 4-cylinder engine, which means it's down on power from the previous generation model. But that's not exactly a bad thing, because its good aspects, such as the car's supreme refinement, extremely supple ride, which is actually bordering on being almost as good as a Lexus RX, far outweigh its minor cons. And if you're one of those people who are tired of long-distance drives along with some of Manila's traffic, then the addition of EyeSight 4.0 will drastically reduce your driver fatigue. Just remember, this is not a self-driving car, but at least here in the Philippines, this is the closest anyone could get to such technologies, at any price point, believe it or not. Because even if you splurge towards the German luxury brands, these features aren't even offered as standard.